So while we're trying to, recycle this plastic, is there any progress that we're making on something that's more sustainable than plastic that has a similar type of property?
Yeah, unfortunately, no. It's truly dictated by the oil industry. Right now, oil is pretty stable, and when the price of a barrel goes up, recycling becomes the better route, right? Because you can get this material cheaper than virgin material. But what we're finding is more products are being made by plastics, and you're looking at pilot programs of actually doing roads with plastics, so they're permeable, they're easily, so right now when we build a highway, we have to tear it apart, we have to redo a road, we have to completely spend a lot of carbon to destroy it and then make it into a new road. There are companies that are looking into making them like Lego blocks, so when we need to move the road around, it allows water to actually permeate the road instead of washing to the oceans. Again, we're making different products out of plastics. The Anthropocene is epoch of our evolution, and it's dictated by plastics. So let's say 1 billion years from now, an alien comes down and starts looking, and we see all of the lovely dinosaurs. The mark of the humans is plastic, and that's not going to go away. It's a product that we use in our solely dependent on. So I know that sounds bleak, but there are lots of entrepreneurs out there that are finding more use for plastics beyond just what you see here. This is prehistoric in the sense of where we're eventually going to get materials. Okay. That answers it.
Sounds bleak.
There are, if I could just add to that. So Roger mentioned some compostable and products, compostable plastics or plastics made out of cornstarch. If we introduce those products into the marketplace, we have to create a way to get that material back, right? So if you go to Earth Cafe or some, sustainably minded coffee shop today, you're most likely drinking out of a compostable cup, but that cup will only compost in a commercial composting facility. And the majority of that cup getting into a commercial composting facility is almost nil. So you're basically drinking out of a compostable cup. It's going to sit in a landfill, and it's not going to compost because there's no oxygen in the landfill.
So that's kind of like getting the buggy before the horse, too.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, it's create this more sustainable material, but you're not processing it at the end of the cycle to make it sustainable. I think Denise was next.
I know most plastic is not recycled, and the plastic production is only going to get worse and worse and worse over time. And then as far as plastic in the ocean, most of it is microplastics, so we're not going to be able to get that as far as the limit that you showed on the screen. And then as far as the numbers that are used on the containers, when it goes to the waste companies, they don't sort it out by number, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Some, like we were talking about earlier, the PET, and you're talking about what's easier to sort, and we're sorting this material as quickly as we can.
But they're not
So
the numbers, though.
No, the important thing, as I mentioned earlier, the PET, the bottles are easy to sort. If you got a clear bottle, like the bottle I just showed you, and the smaller bottles, those are pretty easy as far as sorting it. And then the number 2 is pretty easy as far as sorting it. The other plastics, like the 3 and the 4 or 5, especially if the 4 is a hard plastic, no, that's where mixed plastic comes in. It covers that type of plastic. But in reality, honestly, when that material gets where it has to go, then the sorter will break up the bale, and he's basically looking for the good solid plastics out of there, which is going to be the 5, the polypropylene, and the number 2 plastic, which is a non-bottle for the most part. So they are getting separated, but frankly, only the 1s and the 2s, and the film is easy to pull off. And The styrofoam, if you're sorting that, is easy. It's the ones in the middle.
Some of these plastics are, they're mixing it together and recycling them?
They're mixing them together, and then when it gets to the market, the bale gets to the market, then they will break the bale and pretty much pull out the good stuff.
There is a market then for the
Yeah,
mix?
there is a market for, China is no longer taking the mix, right? But there are a couple of companies that I can't share with you out here because I'll be giving away my market that are taking that material for the most part in the United States. And I'll give you one clue, China does take some of that material also. So it's a matter of developing more markets. It's developing an infrastructure for that type of material.
One getting a little bit more into the weeds on the, especially I guess on the number twos or even the number ones. Okay to leave the lids on?
Yes, please do.
Yeah.
You know, the lid usually doesn't say anything. Is it the same material or you just take the lid off?
It helps with weight for plastic bottles. Please do keep your lid on. Another thing is that it actually allows it to get to a market. So even though it's a different material, the third party will be able to separate and find a market for it. For instance, if you have a yogurt container and the foil on the yogurt container, if you take off the foil, it's no longer recyclable. If you had that foil on the yogurt, it would actually have a higher capture rate. It's the same thing when it comes to plastic bags.
Could you explain that?
Yeah, so when if you guys have not gone to your hauler and taken a tour of the recycling facility, I would highly recommend it. To your point, we use infrared sensors, we use eddy currents, we use air jets, we slow down lines to specifically target material type by density, by size, and by the amount of organic material that's on there. So ultimately, you have a system that's kind of like a TSA bag belt, but ultimately you also have what we call as a star grid, and it looks like comes up, and then there's another one that comes up like that, and there are these stars, and it was in one of the photos, and it's kind of like a metal star that spins up. You have a different size gaps. So when material goes over the star grid pushes the material up and then over to the next one. But in between, you have something called unders. So in the recycling world, you have overs and unders. You're using density, gravity, and the material type to separate. And ultimately, that will fall on a different conveyor belt and then go through a different system. So when you have a yogurt foil lid that's separated, it's now such a small item that it will be considered an under. And it's really hard to find an end market who wants that scrapings of all of them.
So, Clara, you're just speaking about the foil as a recyclable item in itself, separate from the plastic of that.
And when it's attached to that piece of plastic, now this, when I'm talking about it's easy to find a market, this is 2016 and earlier. 2017, when the markets changed, a lot of companies such as CR&R and myself are switching to domestic markets. We look at India, Taiwan. We're looking at places in Southeast Asia that are trying to develop a market for that, because ultimately you provide them a bale, and you say in that bale is a waste characterization of 60% number one, 20% number two, and they're able to then take that bale and stick it into another processing facility that's specifically built for that type of waste characterization. So recycling is truly, what does it mean to have something be recyclable? Is if someone's going to buy it. That's what recycling means. It's not reusing, it's ultimately reusing into the economic mainstream. So someone needs to have a product after it. If no one wants to use paper, just say somehow we created this tree that grows in a day and it's carbon neutral, paper will no longer be recycled. And this is kind of off topic a little bit, but wish cycling is something that we're finding in today's day and age ever since this change in the global market. Wish cycling means that someone has a recycling bin at home and they throw everything. They assume that the waste haul is going to be able to recycle this plastic, they throw it in 1 through 7, they're going to throw it in. But if there's no companies out there that have a financial incentive, a tax incentive, a mandate through policy, then there won't be a market for it. So when you're throwing your bags, your yogurt containers, ultimately what we can do is we can separate it at our facilities. But then if no one's going to buy that bale sits there. What happened in the Pacific Northwest is that they couldn't move the bales. It was wet. These facilities weren't built for storage, and they were built to ship. So all of a sudden in this year, China changed the policies. Pacific Northwest had a bunch of bales. What happened is that they needed to get jurisdictional approval to landfill this material because no one was buying it. Again, it's bleak in the sense that our industries need to be ultimately regulated only through corporate social responsibility, right? It needs to be through the consumer. So as long as we're buying things, and I think your point about the plastic fishing nets is what do? Well, you rely on the market to find a solution for the problem once it gets so bad that there's a cost benefit for that. Or you do the hard thing and you don't buy it. Right? I mean, a lot of us are guilty of buying things out of convenience, myself included. I probably have a lot of bottles in my car. And it's interesting, but if you get the bigger picture, you realize that there's not one bad act. It's a system that was built buggy before the horse, right? We are a product of the Industrial Revolution. It's been nonstop. The oil industry really accelerated this. You guys have seen WALL-E. That's kind of like the worst case scenario in that Pixar movie. But we're already finding entrepreneurs. We're already finding industries that are seeing the waste and seeing dollar figure. $850 million of a market is a big market for one product, right? So I would say in the next 10 to 15 years, it's cyclical. I mean, the 90s were amazing for recycling. There was markets for everything, and then we had a crash recently. And eventually it's going to uptick once we find the technology to actually take these mixed plastics and create an item for it. That just got a lot more.
Go ahead, Eric.
That doesn't go off, this goes on a previous topic. One for you, one for Mark. Can you speak for a minute about the floating use and the waste in the ocean? And how many you see or who's putting them out, and the sustainability of those products. And then Mark, my question to you was, how do you see this it's clear that PET our PET has its closed loop system availability. Are there other closed loop system availability for other products that we use as frequently?
Yeah, super quick. I followed this company just because I studied the issue of the plastic garbage patch has been for decades, right? For a long time this was coming. So this was the first company, private company, that actually did something about it. There are, beyond this, I don't know of any other. There are some that are just tanker trucks and things like that scoop up. But to the second point of yours about companies that are finding use for plastics, I was just speaking to Mark about that. I was at Sustain OC. They had a conference last week here in Irvine, and there was a company called Close Loop, I think it was called, and they take plastics and they make spools for 3D printers. So you're going to get these entrepreneurs that see that there's a waste. They then partner with the waste hauler and say, hey, we will pay for plastic bags, we'll pay for this type of product if you can guarantee consistencies.
So going off that, yes, I do see a closed loop system for any potential material type out there, but it has to start with the brand. So before Roger opened it up, Roger picked up a Keurig cup, a K-cup, right? Keurig needs to take responsibility for that product if they put it out into the market. So it's up to them to create a closed loop system to take that back. Same with Apple with an iPhone, same with Patagonia with a t-shirt. So yes, I envision a closed loop system for every product that's offered in the marketplace.
So you have any luck approaching companies like Keurig about that?
Keurig, I approached Keurig. Keurig is interested in doing what Roger said. Keurig thinks that the system will be solved by consumers ripping off the foil top, dumping out the coffee. But to me, it's crazy, right? So Keurig customers are paying for convenience, right? So how is a brand who is selling convenience expecting their customer to do something that's inconvenient, right? So it's crazy.
Yeah, just to go off of that, Keurig actually rolled out recently a program called, I think it was like K-Cup Recycling or something like that. But they provide these boxes, and it's kind of like what we do with fluorescent lights at City Hall. Now, it was Raytheon, a company that presented about their sustainability program that they have rolled out across the nation. And in their kitchens, they now have a Keurig provides this box, and you just dump the Keurig things into them. And Keurig pays for shipping back to the Keurig factory, in which they then process their own things. And they do all of the cleaning. So they were actually able to create new Keurig cups. So it's changing. It is happening. You're finding companies that are using different materials in plastic cups. I think Starbucks took the heat of this year and last year about the wax that they had to put on their cups. Starbucks cups are not recyclable. Wax-lined cups are not being recycled. So when you throw it on the recycling side on the Starbucks, it's not being recycled. And what's happening is that people are realizing, well, let's not use plastic, let's use materials different that people can actually break down and use. Another company presented at the Sustain.OC, and they were using some type of meat that they were using in these cups. And a lot of different companies are rolling out with that. So you're seeing the change. And again, I'm going to put it at about 5 to 10 years where you will see this change if it's backed by federal legislation and state legislation. It truly comes down to the voters and the propositions that we passed.
My question is around that, just in terms of, I'm not big on regulation, right? But it almost seems, I'm just going to take the example of the green trash cans in my Costa Mesa neighborhood on my street. Less than half the houses use those green trash cans. They just sit there and they're not putting their waste in. So I was wondering in terms of education and getting your consumers on board or your residents on board, are there efforts just to educate even in terms of cost savings if everybody, because the green waste, as far as I understand, goes into gas, it powers the trucks, right?
Yeah. No, you're talking specifically green waste?
Well, I'm talking about, well, green waste is just an example, but it's the organic waste. It's the lawn.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's not go too far off plastic, but you can address that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you guys, I think, were one of our first customers for
Right.
organic waste.
Right.
You're from Costa Mesa?
Yes.
Okay, so again, I'm not really clear on your question. You have,
Well, in terms of, instead of regulating,
Yes.
right, are we educating people on the benefits of recycling their green waste? Because I know, and we could talk about any kind of waste, but do your waste companies have any efforts? I have heard of efforts to sort of just educate the residents on recycling and the benefits to them in terms of cost or cost savings.
I'm not that familiar with Costa Mesa at all,
Okay.
so I need to find that out for you.
Okay.
I can speak just really quick, just so you can kind of get a direction. Waste haulers spend a lot of time educating and re-educating. We actually have programs with our jurisdictions and state mandates for education for specifically businesses and for residential waste. It's a little bit more of a closed loop, so it's an easier stream. In Costa Mesa, you already is one of the first organics. There's not another residential organic program in Orange County. In Southern California, the next closest one would be Manhattan Beach. Participation is incredibly low. CRNR built a tremendous state-of-the-art facility in Paris where they're actually able to compost your organic material with green waste. But beyond education, it really does take state mandates. If there was no mandate, corporations would not recycle.
Right, based on what I see.
And honestly, to your point, it's a human problem. If there was no law, I mean, I don't know if you guys have traveled to a third world country, we kind of talked about it. Plastics is way worse outside. We are very lucky we live in California.
Absolutely.
With these state mandates, but it comes at a cost.
Yeah.
I mean, everything from our property tax to purchasing items, we pay a premium. And it's like I was giving this example earlier, when you want an organic product, you pay $1 more for your organic cabbage because you realize that it takes more emphasis to create a closed loop clean system. Germany does probably the best in the world when it comes to capturing their plastics. They have a 94% capture rate. The next is, I believe it's Austria. Pretty much the top 4 countries are European when it comes to that. And ultimately it's because they don't have space for landfills. So they're forced to do these cradle-to-grave policy initiatives where they mandate. California just passed 2 years ago the little plastic microbeads in your face wash. That's microplastics. That's going to be illegal here in California. I believe it's 2024. So it's coming up pretty fast. But by the time that law passed and when corporations had to abide by it, it's a pretty big time for lobbyists to change that law. But Californians are environmentally focused because we are an economic powerhouse of the United States, and we have an incredibly large coastline. But unfortunately, education comes after policy.
Barbara, why don't you go next?
Yeah, a quick comment and then I do have a question. But it seems like education is definitely part of the difficulty with these issues. And within education, it seems like there needs to be a lot more education. But also, it seems like there's even more confusion because it's not the same everywhere. So I know even as an event organizer, like how I think of trash at home, and then I go and I do an event in a different city, and that's not how trash is necessarily the same there. So then as an organizer, how do I organize the trash in a different city? So it seems like the educational part is really essential, that somehow there's more of that. But if you'll let me ask the question.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so about the compostable things, right? So if we have compostable alternatives that have to go to industrial facilities to actually be compostable, are those better? Like say that there's an item that you want to use and there's not a recyclable product for that thing, right? Like the average trash bag or whatever. Is it better to use a compostable plastic and put it in the landfill bin versus the traditional plastic and put it in the landfill bin? Is there any advantage of the compostable?
Like this guy.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, does that help at all?
Is this any
Or
better?
Okay,
the
so
forks or the, whatnot?
you won't like this answer. To kind of speak about the uniformity real quick, and then I'll get to the compostable items. Senate Bill 1383 is being passed and it's being finalized, and that's specifically for short-lived carbons, but ultimately that translates into organic waste, green waste, and food waste. But the law is so encompassing that it's actually going to mandate card color across the state. So it doesn't matter where you live, your cards will be the same. My lids and CRNR's lids would be different. Again, Sacramento passes a law, but it comes at a cost. That's billions of dollars in replacement of cards. It's going to happen in 2034 is when the law where all jurisdictions will have to have uniform cards. The law is going to be finalized next year. There will be state mandates when it comes to what jurisdictions can do and throw away as far as programs are concerned and education. So the state does understand that there needs to be uniformity across all jurisdictions. It takes a tremendous amount of education and a tremendous amount of council members understanding this because they're going to need to pass ordinances. Otherwise, jurisdictions can be fined up to $10,000 per day. So it becomes very expensive. To the point of compostables. So we have different processes here in Southern California when it comes to processing organic waste. If you go to San Francisco, in the Bay Area, Marin County, they have a lot more land. So their compostable third-party companies can actually take, so when you have a fork and it's made out of corn, it takes about 120 days to 190 days to break in. And you need to make sure that you have a facility that can actually handle that. Here in Orange County, we have one facility for the most part. It's here at the Great Park, it's not too far from here, and it's called Tierra Verde Industries. They take a very large amount of the green waste here. They do not take compostable items. So when you throw away a compostable item in Orange County, it's a regional issue because we don't have the facilities here to handle it. So they end up in the landfill. I know you guys don't like that idea. Now, the landfills, circling all the way back, we have some of the most sustainable landfills in the nation. Wasn't always the case. We had some very, very nasty landfills here in Orange County, no lining, and they're closed now, but it's still seeping into the ground. This is a common practice for landfills. The 3 landfills that we're using now have a life expectancy into the 2100s, so we still have quite some bit of time. They are land-lined, and they do capture the methane and power about 90,000 Orange County homes. So when that compostable item breaks down very slowly, because there's not oxygen, it does break down quicker than plastics. And that methane and gas is captured in our landfills. I would, the Prima de Centre landfill, which is the most southern landfill, actually has ocean views. You can look at across the Laguna Beach. It's beautiful. It's a LEED certified building, and they give tours continuously. So I would highly recommend that so you guys can see that. Also, again, look at your haulers merge facilities because when you actually see who's picking your recycling, it will kind of guilt trip you to do it right. A lot of people throw batteries, sharps, glass, broken mirrors. Ultimately, it is humans that sort through. We have multi-million-dollar facilities, but you still have a sort line manned by humans. Where is the industry going? Robots. We will have robots. Who will ultimately be our pickers. I just read an article. It's the first factory of robots building robots for cars. So we are moving to a new age. 10 to 15 years is usually what I like to say, because 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, we didn't even have an iPhone. So it's phenomenal how fast we're going.
Pam, you can make it.
Yeah.
Why aren't your companies and the other companies, waste management companies, interested in building these commercial compost units? Is there just no money in it? Is that the problem? What's the reason?
We do have a waste-to-energy plant in Paris, Lake Paris.
Lake Paris?
Yeah. Huge, biggest of its kind in the United States. But going back to compost and this material that supposedly that you can compost.
It's made from vegetables.
It's made from vegetables. Here's the problem. When you put that material in our system, and like this gentleman said, if it needs 120 days to disintegrate or become compostable, it's no good to us because we're processing material every day. Okay, so and we're in and out. We're making fuel out of this material.
Right.
So that plastic is going to be plastic for 120 days, for example, or let's say 70 days. It's not. Yeah, well, it needs to break down, so it's a hard commodity. We have to agree with that. But our system can't hold on to that material over that amount of time. So our interest in this type of material, unfortunately, again, is the carriage before the horse. You can't process it when it's hard material.
I did a study when I was at university of palm oil, and it's kind of like the same thing where we have a lot of compostable items made made out of corn. I'm sure you guys have followed like the ethanol situation. Commercial agriculture is an environmental harm. And I know we're kind of straying away from plastics, but when we create these products and there's no closed loop system where there's, you need to make sure that there's another company that's going to buy your end product with the responsibilities. Hey, before you make this bag, who's going to take it after you're done? And you don't have another company that you can source, well then you can create your product, but you're going to have to pay a tax for disposal. This type of structure is there in Germany, and it works. Fortunately, here at a regional, we don't have the space. There is a market for compost. SB 1383, alongside there's another one, it's Assembly Bill 1605, I believe. What that does is there's something called alternative daily cover. Our landfills every day are lined by a tarp and by beer. So you push, spread, and cover the trash, and then you line it with ADC, alternative daily cover. Alternative daily cover is ultimately your green waste. Your residential cards are processed for the majority here at TVI, Tierra Verde Industries, and they're ground up, they're mixed with logs, commercial landscaping. Compostable items can come from another. I'm sure that there are other third parties here in Orange County at a regional level that are providing, and it's just spread over a landfill. That used to be considered recyclable material, right? The state is changing that, and they're considering that now. If you're using it to cover a landfill, they're considering it disposable trash. That law that I kind of mentioned, that jurisdictions have to have 50%, well, they get a majority of that from all that green waste that's being disposed of. Now the state's saying, well, Irvine, you can't consider that 30,000 tons a year of ADC as recyclable, or it's trash. Now there needs to be a new market for that. So the county is actually creating this pilot program where they're going to be building compost facilities on the landfill. So instead of having your ADC just used to cover trash, it's going to be processed in a way that it can actually, hopefully in the future, carry some of the properties, because there's so much land on a landfill, that they're able to actually have it and accept compostable items. Right now, what they're doing is they're just looking to see if they can process the green waste first. It's a water-heavy industry, composting, but it is a lot better than burying.
I want to jump in here for a minute on kind of going back to the consumer education and consumer choice both. So I'm glad I brought these things tonight because they help me remember things. So yeah, this is a choice, this K-Cup. And until Keurig does what you say and has this closed loop, I can choose not to do this. This is my vegan cream cheese. This is the way it comes. There's no other way I can get it. This happens to be, and this is a little side question. So it's plastic, for one thing, but it has no triangle whatsoever. Does that just go in with mixed plastic? It looks like it might be number 2. I don't know. Do they have to have a triangle on them if they are HDPE or PET?
You had a list of questions, Roger.
Yeah.
That I was able to send on to my contact at the plastic company. And I referenced that questions to his attention. And he said that if it does not have, and this is according to him, and I somewhat disagree with him, but he's the expert, okay? He said if it doesn't have a number on it, if there's no number on it, it's highly likely that it's HDPE. Highly likely that's
It's number 2.
Yeah, it's a number 2. It's a number 2 plastic. Don't know if I agree with that. We like to have our plastics with some type of identification, or plastics that we're familiar with, we're used to, that doesn't have a number. We're pretty much sure what that's going to be. But I think you would be relatively safe in predicting that that's a number 2 plastic.
Okay. Yeah, so that gets me back to the education again, you know. I mean, CR&R is, they send out this recycling newsletter with every bill. You know, I'm one of your customers.
Yes.
I read it religiously. The latest one I got all excited, it really just talks a little bit about contaminated plastic, and it
Yes.
doesn't really tell me a whole lot. But in general, I would almost say that CR&R makes people feel, gives people a false sense of comfort about the recycling bin. You know, you're not, but then on the other hand, if you tell people the truth, you know, half the people don't even read this. We care.
More than half.
We
More than
care,
half.
we're
Yeah, more-
confused,
more
we're
than
trying to
half.
do the best thing. Half the people maybe don't even care. I don't know how we fix that through education, but I kind of feel like the waste management companies need to do a little better job to getting the people who do care to do the best thing they can do.
We're just now pretty much getting through a cycle. We really tried, made a super effort, especially with plastics, to recycle everything, because that was our calling card. Say, put it in there, we'll find a way to recycle it. The market blows up. We're going through a cycle where the next one of those you see, probably within the next couple of months or so, we'll have some changes on it. We'll probably have some changes.
Okay.
Roger, you should write that brand. You should write the brand and say, this is confusing.
I'm going to have to start doing that, yeah, because I mean, I feel pretty frustrated, to be quite honest. I don't know what we do.
This is a real basic question about what Roger brought. Do you have to clean these items before you put them into the recycle bin?
Yeah, that's another thing, you know, I mean.
The easiest thing is to keep it dry. If it's a tomato paste jar or
Correct.
pasta sauce, you don't need to rinse pat dry. You can just empty it or do a quick swirl and then cap it. If there's no cap, then it needs to be dry before putting it in because of cross-contamination.
So you are saying clean it.
But for instance, peanut butter is a really good one. We absolutely don't expect you to clean your peanut butter jar. You know, you just cap your peanut butter jar.
And I do, you know, I do, I wipe them out. I get that as clean as I can and I put it in the
And
recycle.
God bless you, because ultimately it's humans that see this. So when you don't, it's a vector control issue at the facilities when there's too much organic waste tied to recyclable materials. And then ultimately, if cross-contamination, you can contaminate an entire load on your trash truck. So say someone was just a jerk and they were lazy and they threw away an entire thing of pickle juice. That jar breaks when we compress on truck and it spills on a whole bunch of paper that we just picked up from the commercial property plaza that was down the road. All of that paper is now contaminated and it will be considered contamination and ultimately municipal solid waste.
On that note, real quickly, everybody should have a recycling monitor at their home.
Yeah.
Okay? And here's what I do. And I do it, they pick up our material, our curbside, every Wednesday along with the trash. I go through that container every Tuesday night to find out what's wrong with it as far as some trash going into the recyclables or some recyclables going into the trash. I do that religiously. And one of the reasons that I really do it is this is a secret between us. One of the reasons I really do it is I'm in the recycling industry. I don't want anybody to come and check my container and find out that I got 50% trash in there. You know what I mean? That's one of my biggest fears.
On average, it's 25% of your recyclables in your recycle container are not recyclable.
Yeah.
So the average right now is 25%. The residue, so residue means the amount of items in the stream that are considered MSW, municipal solid waste. It used to hover in Orange County around 18%. Now it's 36 to 44% of the items that we're pulling out of the recyclables are being considered MSW. That's the bulk of that. 14% of that is truly the industry change. Waste management, CR&R, we are companies that look diligently. We have a trading floor. Ultimately, it are people who constantly call companies around the world looking for pricing and looking for people to purchase. It's that dynamic. So if you think of like Wall Street stock trading floor, it's like that for these bales of recycling. All haulers do that. The smaller the hauler, the more they're hurt and affected by this. The larger the hauler, the easier it is for us to leverage our industry and find someone in Vietnam who can hit it instead of just, someone in Bakersfield.
We did a pilot in the city of Phoenix with PepsiCo, and we put a barcode on every bag of recyclables that we got from the home. And we text messaged the residents regarding their contamination. Because one of the things we see is that there's really no feedback. I mean, this is the first time all of you are getting feedback, correct? And so we provide feedback via text messaging to someone's cell phone if they put something that is considered contamination. And in the pilot program, we dropped contamination down to 1.4%.
What was consistent about this? I'm curious about what you're talking about now. What was the consistent items?
Styrofoam and plastic bags.
There you go.
We got one bag full of diapers, and that was a...
Yeah.
Lynn hasn't had a chance to ask a question yet.
I heard in your talk, actually, particularly, I'm not sure your name, Mark. You were talking about cradle to cradle ideas in this book. I read it also by William McDonough and Michael Braungart.
Yep.
And one of the things they've done, or Michael Braungart I think mainly has done, is he's put together this cradle to cradle certification.
Yes.
That's actually a label that they put on products. And to be honest, I've never seen it in a grocery store or something that I see a cradle to cradle label, but I was wondering if you think that has a future, because I mean, also the data you showed, I suppose you brought it out of some kind of report or table or something, but that should be live for us to use, I mean, to see when we actually go out and buy something.
Sure.
I mean, the numbers are shocking.
Great.
I don't know, as a consumer, you have a lot going on, and you have to think about how you organize your recycling and all this stuff. I want to do it, but on the other hand, where does it end? And I think a part of the responsibility that manufacturers are advocating is to think about their material flows and how they're going to actually recycle the product at the end of the day. So just wondering what you think the future of those
Sure.
flows are.
So the Cradle to Cradle Institute is up in San Francisco, founded by Bill McDonough and Michael Braungart. A lot of the products right now are concentrated on industrial products that they're certifying through their lab. So that's why you don't see a lot of them on the shelf. What I see the future is, and it's mainly pushed by Michael Braungart, is the intelligent product system. So if you think of a can of Coke or a can of LaCroix, if you will, right? You don't really want to own that aluminum can, do you? You just want to enjoy the beverage, correct? You just want your thirst quenched. You really don't want to own that can. So Michael Braungart pushes a concept where the manufacturers maintain ownership of that aluminum even when you have it. And you are just actually buying performance rather than buying the material. So that is where I see the future, and that is why I'm optimistic. Because I feel that brands will maintain ownership of the materials. You will not purchase the materials, you will only purchase performance in the future.
You really need consumers to help understand that and help drive that.
Yes.
That's what's going to make that future. You had a question, right?
Well, it's very specific to where you...
No, you and then Patty.
I'm sorry. My question is very specific to living in Miguel. When I first moved there in 2014, the first thing I did was look for the recycle bins. I live in an apartment complex. I was told that you just trash everything and it's sorted at the waste management companies.
That's called mixed waste processing or dirty MRFing. Laguna Niguel, I think, is CR&R, correct? Or is that Lake Forest?
They do have dirty work though.
Yeah. So your complex, how many units is it? Like more than 5? Okay. So Assembly Bill AB 341 is for 5 units or more. They actually have to have recycling. The backdoor to that is if they have mixed waste processing. Ultimately, what happens is that material sorted there. Any recyclables are cherry picked. On average, you're going to get about 12% diversion, 12 to 20. If you're on the 20%, you're kind of waving a magic wand. It's a way of doing it. I live in Guanam Park. I'm right there on the border of Fullerton. We have EDCO. I don't have a recycling container. This is residential, so I only have a trash container and a green waste container. So, my kitty litter and my milk jug get thrown into the same one, and ultimately a human is sorting that out at some point.
Would it be better to put the recyclables in a different trash bag than
Paper supplies.
See, the ban against the bag is a nationwide campaign because haulers are pushing for it because it's really hard for us to know what's in that bag. The blue bag pilot program was a great case example. If we have someone putting a bunch of recyclables in a black trash bag, how are we supposed to know that's not? Well, we have to break it open and ultimately sort through it. There is no rule for that. There's no panacea, unfortunately.
Patty and Mr. Brett. Probably take about those two more questions because it's getting close to 9:20. And I have something to say to that.
My question is, it sounds like unless we hold different groups accountable, we're not likely to have anything happen. We talked about holding brands accountable, but I also don't see consumers being held accountable. And so I would think a lot of consumers who don't care, they're recyclable stuff sent into landfills. So is there anything that's going to push consumers to be more accountable for their recyclable materials?
Trust. That's what we've seen in our studies. If people trust the system, if people trust where they know the material is going, and what's being made into, then they will partake. That's what we've seen in our studies.
And I
One of
think
the largest things though is, I think one city tried this and it really worked. I don't know if it's still working. But you had the staff of the city that would come by and take a look at your material. We're talking about curbside. And if you were upside down in what you were doing, and just not taking care of business, they'll give you a warning, then they'll give you a fine. So but that's probably too involved because if you're talking about, a city that has 700,000 residents, like maybe the city of LA, it would be overly involved. It may work in a smaller city type setting, but because people, once they get hit where the money is, they make changes pretty quickly.
Okay, Rick, last question.
What do I do with my dog shit? Should we not put them in plastic bags to avoid some of the problems that you guys talked
It
about?
depends on what city you live in. If you have a source separated recycling program, obviously feces go into your trash. The city of Manhattan Beach is actually going through a contract renegotiation, and they wanted to mix waste process the bus stop containers, and through waste characterizations, they realized that most bus stop waste receptacles have a lot of dog feces on them. So it would be kind of counterintuitive to do something like that. Ultimately, feces go into the trash. Your trash, if you ever go to that landfill tour, you'll see how easy it is to throw something away. It will literally go from your house to possibly a transfer station, which means just a floor, and then it gets pushed to an 18-wheeler, and then it gets to a hole in the ground. The ground is lined, but dog feces go into the trash.
There is
plastic bag?
a
Should we
poop
put a
bag
plastic bag?
version of this compostable, and so if you walk your dog, and I think it's probably better than a non-compostable. It's going to go in the landfill, but like you say, after X number of days, it's going to break down. They capture the methane and they power homes.
Exactly, versus 400 years versus about 190 days to maybe a year.
Yeah.
The issue again is you have to research the company, reach out to the companies that you are purchasing to. If the company is cutting down rainforest to grow corn to make your compostable bags, gas tax, or you do taxes on items, and it goes to a general fund or an enterprise fund, there's a lot of misallocation and misuse of the taxes. So I highly recommend understanding before you pass a tax, because it's going to save wildlife habitat. Understand who can access those tax dollars. The 10 cents that you were paying for those bags, unfortunately, not all of that money is going to education that it was supposed to do. Always research your policies, research your taxes. Policy and taxes are different. The same thing is reach out to your companies. You might not think we're a Fortune 250 company, but if you email us and your address is in Orange County, it might take a couple of weeks, but it will come to me eventually. Corporations do have methodologies to capture questions and concerns, because lawsuits can happen. So corporations do this thing, absolutely.
Okay, I think we better cut off the questions. I've got one more thing I want to announce, but first I want to thank Hashem and Mark and again, I think my overall impression is we learned a lot, brought a lot to the party, and but at the same time, it showed us that we've got a long way to go.
Regarding fishing nets, can I, 2
Yeah.
seconds? I don't know.
I'm so sorry, Barbara left.
Oh, yeah, there's a California company in Ventura that started a system down in Chile collecting fishing nets and turning them into skateboards, etc. So you can look them up at burio.co.
So, speaking of policy, you would think there should be some policy that commercial fisheries can't just abandon these things.
It's a big ocean.
Yeah.
That's the issue. So illegal dumping occurs.
Enforcement would be the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do we need to know,
But the
is
fines
that
are
big
large.
new thing gonna collect the fish nets, or will they be under that?
No, fish nets usually do end up capturing other pieces of plastic and end up being in islands. So
Oh.
they are collected, but unfortunately before that occurs, fish nets do a lot of damage.
Yes, thank you.
So if you want to get even deeper into this issue, this just popped up a few days ago on social media, I guess. There's, or no, I got the email from Denise. Yeah. UCI is hosting an event called Solutions to Plastics. So that's going to give us all the solutions. You guys should. But it's Monday, November 5th from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Beckman Center.
You have to sign up for it.
And it is free, yeah, but you would have to sign up for it ahead of time. But, I have no idea what sort of overlap there will be with what they're discussing and what we're trying to solve here, but they say they've got solutions to plastics. Yeah, Denise.
Another good film that I watched that everybody needs to see, it's called Albatross. And it's about what happens to the albatross birds in Midway Island in the Pacific due to plastics. So it's very artistic, very beautiful as far as scenery, the stories.
Okay. Albatross. All right, well, thank you, everybody, for your interest. Thanks for coming.